Thank you, David. I'd like to move a mic. I'd like to invite our next session participants to come up on stage. Now we're going to actually hear some real case studies on cloud adoption in the federal government. And I'm delighted to introduce the person leading this particular session. We were talking this morning, and he actually spoke at this event in its inception 6 years ago, and his company's always been very supportive of this event. So I'd like to turn it over to Greg Gianforte, who's the CEO of RightNow Technologies.
Okay, thank you, Rihanna, and good morning, everyone. It's great to see you. We have a great panel. The purpose of this panel is to look at specific case studies of agencies in the federal government that have deployed cloud-based solutions so that we can all learn from their shared experience, and we have a great panel, so that's terrific. As Rihanna mentioned, I'm CEO and founder of RightNow Technologies. We've been providing cloud-based applications to the federal government for over a decade. We currently have 170 agencies with systems deployed, arguably making us probably the largest provider of cloud-based applications to the federal government. We've seen this growth both in the public sector as well as in the private sector. Our own business was up 44% last year just through organic growth. We have 1,100 people around the world delivering cloud-based applications. And part of that caused Oracle to decide that we should be part of their organization. So 2 weeks ago, we actually became a wholly owned subsidiary of Oracle. Oracle is moving very aggressively to deliver cloud-based applications for the federal government. We have a dedicated group here in DC just working with federal agencies to do cloud-based applications. The motivations, Dave McClure shared them with us. They're really simple. I mean, cloud-based applications go in 5 times faster and cost 80% less to own. And in times of tight budgets, it's hard to ignore those kinds of business benefits. Also, with the administration's focused on cloud first and the leadership we've seen out of GSA around FedRAMP, it's something we need to figure out for each one of our agencies. So we're really pleased with the panel we have here. The way we're going to run this session, I will do all their introductions up front. Then I'm going to ask each one of them to come and spend about 10 minutes giving us a highlights of what's going on in their agency. And then we'll try and reserve as much time as possible for Q&A at the end. Okay? So first, David Terry is with us. David is with the Department of Education. He's Deputy Director there of the Information Resource Center. David Terry is in the Office of Communications and Outreach. As I mentioned, Deputy Director of Information Research Center. The IRC is a citizen contact center that provides information and referrals and in-depth assistance for federal education law and policy to the general public. David manages the IRC to ensure that ed-related facts and resources are easily accessible to the public. So in terms of government transparency, he's promoting that plank of the administration's plan, including mobile optimization of information, Facebook delivery of content, of all the questions and answers that people are looking for. So that's David Terry. He'll speak first. Also with us is Tom Morton, Chief Engineer of Forge.mil at DISA, the Defense Information Systems Agency. The question comes is, can DoD actually use the cloud? And we'll hear from Tom on that topic. They're providing a full-featured application lifecycle management and rich content and collaboration capabilities today through the cloud. It's intended for use by any IT capability provider and or software development team, supporting the DoD and is available to anyone affiliated with the DoD. Mr. Morton is charged with overseeing the development, testing, and integration of the components comprising Forge.mil. We've also at RightNow Technologies, we've had the pleasure of partnering with DISA in getting all of our applications DIACAP certified, and they're actually now in production at a DISA data center in Oklahoma City on behalf of a number of DoD agencies, including the Air Force. Also with us today is Wes Lloyd, Research Associate for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in the Natural Resources Conservation Service, NCRS, NRCS. Wes Lloyd is in the Department of Agriculture, and it's this area is a conservation leader for natural resources and is responsible for ensuring private lands are conserved, restored, and resilient to environmental challenges. So that's our panel. Looking forward to hearing what you gentlemen all have to say. And first, David Terry, please.
Thanks, Greg. Good morning. Thank you for having us, Greg, and to be part of this panel to discuss what we're doing at the Department of Education. We're really proud of the services that we can provide to the general public, and although we might not be saving lives with the information that we put out there for them, we're certainly setting them up and preparing them for achievement, to be academically prepared and to compete globally in this global economy. And so as part of that mission, there are over 50 million students who attend elementary and public schools. And those students not only have kind of exponential factors of parents and business leaders as well as other community members who are helping them out, we're dedicated to them as well as that larger audience. We want to provide as much transparency, as Greg mentioned, to that audience, as well as ease of use so that their user end is feasible where they are, whenever they are, and on what platform they choose to access that information. Just a little bit of history about the Information Resource Center. Back in 2004, when we were kind of officially organized in the Office of Communications and Outreach, we were a small office of roughly 6 to 8 individuals, and those 6 to 8 individuals were receiving 20,000 phone calls a month and roughly 1,200 emails a month. We didn't have the best system in place to kind of manage all of that volume. And although that volume may be small in comparison to other agencies and the traffic that you might see, it was overwhelming. And so we decided to look at what our options were, and cloud-based options were what we looked at. What that meant is we partnered with RightNow, and as a disclaimer, we currently use RightNow, but this isn't explicitly an endorsement for RightNow. This is an opportunity to talk about what we do and why we do it successfully, and how RightNow has leveraged some of those resources that allow us to connect to our constituents. With that change, what we've seen is an improved self-service rate. So on the front end, our users now have a knowledge base which they can access and have over 200 questions in both English and Spanish, where they can easily access information from special education to issues of higher education to federal student aid. And although we aren't federal student aid, we do interface with them to try and make sure people know what resources they can get to immediately without kind of having to hand wring and go through multiple channels. And so we do communicate interagency, and we try and also partner with outside agencies to make sure that our information is smooth, that it's free-flowing, and that it leads to the correct resources. So what we were able to do in 2004 is kind of think about our options, and cloud-based options seemed like the way to go for all the reasons that were listed by David McClure. We wanted to save on cost. We also wanted to have a fast and efficient way to deploy this information, and we wanted it to be scalable, and we wanted to be able to plug into new opportunities. And although at the time we didn't see Facebook as rampant or Twitter as rampant a service and or communication vehicle, we wanted to be able to tap into new technology. And forgive the analogy, but watching the Super Bowl, there was a specific car commercial that sort of hit it on the nail for me. And what you see in black and white is kind of a Sony Walkman, and then it starts being pulled backwards, and you see a record player, and you see all these different types of technologies in black and white as they're getting pulled back forward. And of course the car is in color, Technicolor, and it's moving forward with all the latest and greatest technology. Well, we consider cloud to be that kind of technology, and we're not naive to think that that's the only solution, but we want to be able to be a part of that new technology. We want to tap into what it offers, and we want to be able to ensure that the customer base who's already tapped into some of those communication vehicles can then trust the U.S. Department of Education to give information in an accurate and timely way through those vehicles. So in our Technicolor, we formed a modern contact center where people can still phone, and we still average about the same amount of phone calls a month. But where we've reduced time and effort is on the email side and on the self-service rates. And so we average roughly 50 to 80,000 views on our FAQs, and that's across Spanish and English. So what that would mean is if those 50,000 to 80,000 individuals wanted to contact us by phone or by email, our staff of 8 specialists now is at our current staffing would be completely bogged down. We wouldn't be able to get back in a timely way. So through our solution, we've set up business rules, and we've set up kind of timely responses, automated responses, as well as suggestions to FAQs that they can go to if they haven't already accessed the resource. We also wanted the solution to be accessible internally. We wanted it to be easy to use for our staff. And what we do in our office is, although we have one administrator, we delegate across the whole staff to kind of be a part of the team to ensure that all of our material is up to date and that it's effective and that it's meeting the needs of our current clientele or the general public. Within that, we've got several kind of sub-delegates who can then maneuver within the back end of the system and make sure that it's up to date and ensure that the answers are placed where they need to be, or add new answers as needed. And they don't necessarily have to wait for the administrator to be there, but they can then see that in a production stage and then roll that out of development into production. And that's one thing that we like about the cloud is we can manipulate some of the look and feel, the questions, the answers, the backgrounds. The customer portal can be modified through HTML and different types of languages, and we can see that in a development stage before we actually push that out. That's beneficial to us because we can ensure that what we put out there then is what meets the needs of our customers. So what's key to the Information Resource Center is that our customers are first and foremost that they have trust in the information that's out there, that it's easy to access, that they can get to it anytime they want to. And to that end, we've leveraged some new modules that we've added to our package, which includes mobile optimization. And since we already had kind of our certification and accreditation, CNAs, and everything already in place with the RightNow contract, it was easy to add and upgrade our customer portal to then include some of these new services that we see trending. And we think that mobile phones are clearly, they're becoming the access point for most of our demographic. And a lot of that demographic is 18 to 25, students who are getting into college, who predominate on their Facebook and their Twitter accounts and their social media. So what we've done is through the solution, we've been able to optimize our English side and Spanish side FAQs so that when anybody comes by on their iPhone or their Android or whatever device, it's going to automatically resize it to their screen. It's going to be native to what their application is, and it'll be seamless. They won't even have to choose. It'll go there, and if they don't want to be there, they have the option to go to the full site straight from the application. And the functionality is in place. It allows them to do everything that they would do on a regular desktop, on their laptop, or anywhere that they want to be. They can do it right from the palm of their hand. They could be in line for a financial aid counselor, and they could quickly come to us and think about questions or do a quick search on financial aid and maybe be equipped with better questions for the counselor to ensure that they get the aid or resources that are best suited for them. So we're excited for the mobile optimization, and some of our challenges now is to outreach that and to make the public aware that service is available and that they can access it at any time. Another component that we've added is the Facebook customer experience. And this is neat. It's still new, and the Department of Education's Facebook page isn't the most popular, so we're still looking at ways to drive traffic there, but individuals can stay within the Facebook environment where they're already comfortable, where they're probably spending an inordinate amount of time already online. And they can stay there and ask questions and do it all right there within the console. And all of that, we think, just extends another customer benefit to the public to allow them to be able to access everything that the Department of Education would like to promote out there. And we're constantly evolving and thinking about our product, but this is just kind of one way that we've implemented the solution, and we feel that mobile, as well as Facebook, and other social media is kind of the new wave in terms of interacting with our customer. And with that, I turn it over to our next presenter.
Okay, thank you, David. Tom Morton. Again, Tom Morton is with DISA.
I am, and you're not. So thank you very much for having us today. Just wanted to come in quickly, tell you a little bit about what we're doing at DISA as well as on Forge.mil. For those of you who don't know, the Defense Information Systems Agency runs the defense networks, both NIPRNet, SIPRNet, runs the satellites. It has a very large-scale computing center in operations, 12 of them around the world. We call them enterprise information centers. We support activities all across the DoD for both the services, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, and the combatant commanders. We are a combat support agency. So when we get up in the morning, we think about maybe some sons and daughters of yours that might be in the military service like my daughter, or the warfighter as well. That's the first thing that we are there for. We asked to come in today, at least on the webpage, it says come in and talk a little bit about what factors we look at in terms of adopting cloud computing, what some of the hurdles of adoption are, and a little bit about what you should know about when dealing with the federal government, and I'll just say the DoD, because the DoD, we're here to help. The cloud for the DoD is not the fog of war, and Forge.mil does not compromise the components. We actually comprise the components. Sorry to correct you. But anyway, Dave did a really great job, I think, with all the information he gave you regarding the federal government, FedRAMP, and so forth in terms of what's going on. So let me tell you a little bit about what we're doing with Forge. Right now, Forge.mil is an application lifecycle management tool, much like SourceForge.net. Everybody know what that is? By show of hands, kind of get that idea? So we're here really to promote the adoption of open source, and I'll say open source-like practices and methodologies within the department. So about 3.5 or 4 years ago, the Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff funded us to kick this little project off. And today we have over 13,000 registered users, 700 projects using Forge.mil on both NIPRNet and SIPRNet. And just so you know, we have two kinds of models that we use. We have one for those that want to do open collaboration. We have a, quote, free version, which taxpayers, we thank you very much for your support, where you can come in and you can put your code, you can have a project that collaborates with you, you can contribute, you can have open contribution from other members across the department. Or for those kinds of projects that are a little bit more sensitive about what's going on, we have a funded version which allows them to come in and actually control access a little bit more carefully. So we don't want to compromise the integrity of the work that's going on, and we certainly don't want to expose it to those individuals that might have some nefarious motivations. On top of the application lifecycle management tool, we have adopted an open source technology called Drupal to help us add some of the more social aspects to doing IT within the department. So Project Forge or Software Forge has a center of a project as the design center. That's for projects, that's really good. But if you're a group or a community of interest, having the ability to be able to link to multiple projects that you're related to is a very important capability. Just so you'll know, all of our applications are deployed using virtualization technology. I don't want to call that a, quote, cloud, but we're virtualized from beginning to end, from our development all the way through our production, which really leads to the next activity that I really wanted to talk about. Dave alluded to a number of areas that the federal government's looking at, and he mentioned development and testing, prototyping, increasing the speed of delivery. So what we're focused on right now is augmenting the capability that we have within Forge and beginning to include the cloud-like activities. We believe in a delivery pipeline, or what we've termed continuous delivery. That's our next major target, to allow the developer, the stakeholder, the certifier, the tester, the warfighter to be involved in the process really from beginning to end, and to utilize really the benefits, I think, of cloud in new and, quote, innovative ways. Put a quote around innovation, by the way. Everybody know, does anybody know who Peter Denning is, by the way? Yes, there's a guy. He's an old guy like me. He's in computer science, and he did some important things. He defines innovation as changing the behavior of a community, not just new technology stuff, but actually changing things. And Dave alluded to that, where he said we're bringing new stuff in, and having resistance to that change is quite obvious to us. So what is continuous delivery? What are we trying to develop within Forge right now to support the activities of the developers, within the department that are actually delivering capability to the warfighter. So we want to be able to provide online, as NIST would say, self-service access to all the resources necessary in an integrated way, in an integrated way that's easy to use and easy to acquire, to anybody who's involved in the process, be it requirements, certification, developer, tester, warfighter, et cetera, leveraging the automation that's available to us under cloud technologies today. So we've coined, or we're using the term, programmable infrastructure. Just having the ability to go out like we can do today with another product that DISA offers called RACE, which is the Rapid Access Computing Environment, and ordering virtual servers, turning them over to a developer and saying, good luck. You know, that's not good enough for what we're really trying to do in terms of both continuous delivery and having a programmable infrastructure. So now, instead of thinking about virtual machines as just virtual hardware machines, we want to be able to say that we can turn these things on demand in a continuous way for the purpose that it's needed. And everybody has the poster child of, we want to do performance testing, we only need 10,000 machines for an hour, spin me up 10,000 virtual servers, let me do some performance testing so I can put a load of 10 million users against this thing and see if we're just as productive as Google, right? That's what we want to do. Well, it turns out most of our applications aren't that big, except for things like enterprise email. So what are some of the hurdles to adoption? In this particular space, not only cloud, but within the continuous delivery notion, it really is a puzzle. A lot of companies out there are beginning to do many of the aspects that we have, and there are vendors out there that are coming to us every single day saying, hey, we can solve this particular part of your problem. Okay, we're based on open source, we're very open sourcey kinds of guys, but we're also open to COTS. The product that we use underneath Forge is from a company called CollabNet, so we licensed that. We feel that we got it accredited. That was a big effort for us. Oh, we had to CAC enable it, for those of you that know what that means, that we had to do that. But you can't come into us and say, here, I fit into your puzzle, without really understanding what my objective is, and we can tell you a little bit more about that. And then coming in with a point solution doesn't really help me too much. The second thing is status quo, change, trying to change the thoughts of very large contractors who are doing business, and they're doing it very well, thank you very much, but they don't want to come in and change for a couple of reasons. They have a contract, they have a deliverable, and they don't want us to come in and say, you have to change all that, because then they go, I'm at risk. And so in order for us to pay them, they need to actually deliver what we've asked for. And then we have the proverbial gatekeepers at the bottom. And we have lots of them. We have acquisition executives, we have certification and accreditation people that are very interested in what we're doing and keeping us secure, not only our platform, but the platforms that get delivered. Forward. Did I go back too many? Hurdles. Right. What do you need to know? First of all, how many of you sell to the Department of Defense? How many want to sell to the Department of Defense? Okay, good. I started out working for a little company called Apple Computer and did a lot of things out in the commercial world and BEA, and they brought me in because I was a commercial guy and I supposedly knew how to bring new stuff in. So it takes a long time to sell to the Department of Defense, agreed? However, the rewards are quite large. So you have to be patient, and you can't think that you come in and we have this, multi-billion, I don't even know how many tens of billions of dollars our budget is for IT. Just can't assume that we've got money to burn, because we really don't. So you have to be prepared for a long process, especially if you do not have a vehicle or a contract by which I can buy your product. Software vendors came in to see me last week. They said, this is great. I said, this is great. I said, how do I buy it? And they say, vehicle? Reseller? Can't you just give me a purchase order? No. So we have to go through our evaluation. We actually have to go through an acquisition process that many of you may be aware of. That little diploma in the middle represents certification. So my application runs on 10 servers on the NIPRNet side of the world. It turns out that I have to get my system reaccredited in June of this year. The Field Security Office will send a team of 6 experts down to look at my system for a week. That's how much rigor they put into actually doing the accreditation. So if a new application comes into the Department of Defense, again, Dave talked about FedRAMP and trying to ease that particular process. If you think FedRAMP has got some interesting controls, come on into my world. Fourth thing is, please don't come in and talk to us about a field of dreams. Don't come in and say, hey, if you just stand up our application, everybody's going to come to us and they're going to want to use it. So we need to have an understanding of both the business model, who the users are, and how much they might actually be willing to contribute. So we field a capability for the entire Department of Defense, and that was sponsored by a 4-star who said, stand up Software Forge, and that's what we did. But we've also been asked by our agency to actually prove the market, so to speak, by having a capability that can be, quote, charged for. So we have to be very careful, because efficiencies, which means less money, we have ways that can actually justify the cost. And finally, there was a guy whose name was General Wood. He used to be, I think, the vice commander at a place called Joint Forces Command. And we were talking to him about all the great stuff that you could do with agile methodologies. And gee, look at how Oracle does this, or BEA does this, or Apple does this, or Google. Google was the big one at the time. And he said, look, I appreciate the fact that commercial companies can do what they do, and it's really great. But he says, Google is not lethal. So part of what we need to make sure we understand is, first of all, our customer, DISA, Forge.mil, is the warfighter. So if you come in as a vendor wanting to do business development, have a context that helps us understand how the capability that you're bringing into us takes and brings really good capability, helps us develop it better, faster, cheaper, using cloud technology to deliver a capability to the warfighter, number one. And number two, I'll leave you with this. Ms. Takai came and asked me a question when we were at our customer conference, and her very first question was, how is the warfighter using Forge.mil? So we'll be asking you, how will the warfighter, we affectionately refer to them as, I won't say how we used to, but we have very good terms for our warfighters that are actually out there developing software and trying to contribute it around to their compatriots using Forge. We have to come and tie it directly to the men and women in harm's way. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you. And Wes from Department of Agriculture.
Thank you, Greg, for the opportunity to talk today. And I'm here to talk about the USDA-NRCS and how we've begun to use the cloud in some of our projects. Specifically, what we're looking at is taking scientific models and deploying them so that field users, so that conservationists in the field can have access to models. So at the USDA, we have conservationists at the county level field offices throughout the United States, and they do consulting with farmers regarding different conservation practices with dealing with managing the land so that year after year the land remains fertile and viable for generations of farmers. And so the agency has many different environmental models, and historically these have been deployed as legacy desktop applications. However, the process that USDA-NRCS would use would be an annual update process, which was somewhat slow, and it restricted delivery of new science models. And so that these models were scattered across desktops within the agency, and that caused challenges in terms of rolling out new changes. So what the agency is looking at doing is taking their modeling capacity and moving that into a cloud and hosting it as a model services. At the USDA-NRCS, and I'm also with Colorado State University, we've put together a cooperative agreement where we're developing a model services architecture which will support science delivery to end users in the field. And our goal is to take these desktop models and deploy them as web services. So we've taken the science modeling and put it into the cloud, essentially. And so this is an infrastructure as a service cloud deployment. And our goal is to be able to scale the compute capacity of these models to meet peak loads. And at certain times of the year, such as year-end reporting cycles, there's a need to scale our modeling capacity. And there's also this, some of our models, particularly watershed models, are very compute intensive. So they will benefit from the cloud because you'll have access to more compute capacity than what you would have typically. So in a typical cloud application deployment, what we're doing is we've taken an application that you historically would have deployed on physical servers, and you're doing this with virtual servers, and there's some mapping that must go on there. And so our prototype model that we used is the Russell II model, which is a soil erosion model. And this combines empirical and process-based science to predict soil erosion and degradation. And this is an agency standard model used by 3,000 field offices across the US to help inventory soil erosion rates. And this is a major conservation planning tool used by the agency. So our goal was to take this model and deploy it as a cloud-based web service. And so Russell II was it basically was our prototype model, and we have several other models in the pipeline that we look to move to the cloud. It's a very typical application with an application server, a spatial geospatial database, and we're hosting 30 million shapes for the soils database in the cloud. And we also have a file server with about 500,000 XML files that help feed the model. And we also have a logging server. So we have a multi-tier client-server application that's been taken from a legacy C++ desktop application, and we've moved this into the cloud. And for our prototype development, we've adopted Eucalyptus as our cloud middleware. And we built 2 clouds in Fort Collins. That's where we're at, ERAMS Cloud and OMS Cloud. The first cloud having about 9 servers and OMS Cloud. So these are private clouds, and this allowed us to experiment with cloud computing and EC2 before actually going into a public space such as Amazon. And so advantages with Eucalyptus were the Amazon EC2 support. So we were able to develop with this private cloud, and that's plug and play onto Amazon. So we can simply take our virtual machines and our images and just deploy them on Amazon. But Eucalyptus allowed us to do this in-house without dealing with the details of moving into a public space. And Eucalyptus has the advantage of many similar features that Amazon has, including elastic IPs, private virtual LANs, and we've primarily used KVM and Zen hypervisors for our virtualization solution. So at this point, we have a short demo. And so one of the motivations for moving to the cloud for us is that we wanted to make models more available to the end user. And this notion of ubiquitous computing and taking your services and deploying them to end users. So we developed an Android application to run the soil erosion model using the Android platform. So historically, this was a desktop Windows application, and there's a group in the USDA that's called the Mobile Planner Development Group, and their goal is to take these science models and provide them on tablets or handheld devices in the field so our conservationists can actually go out and work with farmers and do modeling in the field. And so this is just a prototype proof of concept demo. This is the form-based version, which basically, to run a soil erosion model, you identify a slope and a length, a slope steepness, you indicate management practices, and we've also interfaced here with Google Maps. And so this is an area in Tennessee, farm field, and this demo here will show how you can use this application to identify a slope. And so we identify 2 endpoints, and that went out and fetched elevation data. So now we know the slope length and steepness. Now the GPS capability of the phone could also be used to capture slope length elevation data. And this then can be used to parameterize the model. And so now we've identified this transect, and we're selecting a management practice for what the farmer might be doing with that section of land. And so all these things are in USDA's NRCS databases, and they come through the web services hosted by our Eucalyptus private cloud. And so there we have a model run with the slope degradation, the degrade value, and that means tons per acres per year, and that's a very important figure for a soil conservationist. Maybe can we go back to the slides? So the key results of our prototype and development out in Fort Collins for the USDA-NRCS is that we initially took this Russell 2 model, and we were able to scale and do 1,000 model runs in about 36 seconds across eight machines using the Eucalyptus platform. We also took the spatial database, the soil spatial database for the entire country, and we deployed that using virtual machines in our Eucalyptus cloud. That's about 30 million shapes, and so we chopped this database into pieces, and we achieved about a 10 millisecond query response time, and that's the kind of response time that we need to do real-time modeling for end users. We demonstrated the Android app, and there are several additional models that we're planning to migrate. But this is just an example of how we are at the USDA-NRCS looking forward and developing solutions to harness the cloud in the future to help conservationists help farmers.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Wes. So we've got almost 15 minutes for Q&A, and I want to kick it off with the first question for Wes and David. So you guys are visionaries. You came up with this crazy idea to move stuff to the cloud, and then you had to sell it internally. So I'm curious if you wouldn't mind just answering the question, how did you go about convincing the higher-ups that this moving to the cloud was a good idea, and what resistance did you hit?
And this is an ongoing challenge, really, in the sense that we aren't entirely clear about how we'll deploy these things in the long term. But for what we're doing with science models, a lot of our models are in Fortran or C, they're legacy. We really need this infrastructure as a service cloud capacity, because you have to take these legacy pieces and integrate them with current pieces and just deploy them. And I just don't see how you would do that, and particularly with modeling, because it's very compute intensive. Mm-hmm. Just the scalability in the cloud.
So it's really the practicality of broad deployment of these models.
Right, because these were never meant to be in the services.
Yeah.
But the agency wants everything service-based.
Yeah. David, how about you?
My experience is recent. 2004 predates my time, so at that point I can't speak to, but my director has informed me that they wanted to have a model that was scalable, that could easily breathe, both expand as well as contract as necessary as we saw services. And going with the solution that we have, we're constantly talking with our OGC, we're constantly talking with our Assistant Secretary of Communications, and currently with the new administration and some of the heavy emphasis in social media, that kind of opened the conversation, because there is new media and push towards that, and we wanted to we're having these conversations online, but we're trying to figure out how can we be a part of that community, how can we shape that community, because we realize that the community is going to be shaping us in some way with their own conversations and and that could be negative or positive. And so we want to interject, we want to be a part and influence that conversation and ensure that they're there. So those are the conversations we have with my boss and with our higher ups, and we try and convince them that there's utility in being a part of that communication in a proactive way. and still be safe about the language that we put out there and still protect the image of the department.
Sure. Tom, anything you want to add?
We're selling the economics as well as the benefits of development and test. We find that there's approximately, in my integration lab, I have 30 servers to represent my environment. I have about 30 or 40 in development. That's 70 servers that we would have to support dev test for 10 in production. So there's a 5 to 10 times number of dev test servers, so the economics. The second part is providing an environment within a department construct such that when code is delivered by contractors, we know where it is, it's in a government repository, and then we can run it through the CNA process within our own environment.
Okay, great. I'd like to take most of the questions from the audience. Who would like to be first? Yeah, sir?
You mentioned your agency wants to move towards services, and you also talked about having legacy environments, Fortran, and I can imagine you might have dozens and dozens of different apps. So how much of this story is really a cloud story, and how much of it is a service-oriented architecture story? And where does the SIIA story fit into the cloud story at USDA?
Okay, well, for us with these legacy models, the problem is the science code is difficult, and you don't want to redevelop the science code. And some of these, you'll have a scientist that spends their entire life developing a model. And so all their intellectual property is in this Fortran code. And so we don't want to get in the business of re-engineering somebody's legacy model. And so so part of it is a services equation, but then with modeling itself, due to the fact that science models tend to be compute intensive, the scalable part is really important for us, particularly for the large models that we can expand to use 20 virtual machines or 100, rent it for half an hour or however long. The ability to scale up and scale down is really key because these things were never meant to be web services. But now we can do that. With the cloud, it opens new doors that weren't there before.
Okay, great. Next question? Who has the next question? Got a great opportunity, some real pioneers up here. Yes, sir.
This is specifically to David. Oh, sorry. This is specifically to David. How did you deal with the issues, particularly in the Department of Education, around, say, perhaps you're dealing with minors all the time, and how do you deal with those kinds of issues, the regulatory pressures for that, and how did you address those things before you deployed your infrastructure?
We had to do all the security. And fortunately, our front-end system, we're only asking for limited PII. And we don't, so what happens at the Department of Education, just a breakdown, is we're in the communications and outreach, which kind of is the overarching agency, but there's federal student aid, which then really has impact and drills down into people's lives and collects a lot of information. Fortunately, we're not managing that element of it, but we certainly have to think about the privacy issues, security issues, where the data is being stored, and all of those questions that go into. I can't speak to FSA's contract or federal student aid's contract, but on our own side, we were asking those questions. Where is the information being stored, and how is it being protected? How can we ensure that some of these new modules, such as open source login, OAuth, and different types of way for people to log in with already credentials that they've established in other platforms. We wanted to make sure that if we access those, are we within our legal realm? And are we collecting only the information that we need, which currently is very limited. All we need is a first name and an email to respond to folks who want online service or email responses. And phone calls are anonymous for the most part. And believe it or not, we still get some mail and we still get some faxes. But with the knowledge base, that's allowed us to kind of show the efficiency of putting information out first, boosting up the self-service rate, and then always kind of erring on caution's side in terms of security. But those are conversations that are continuously happening with our CIO and with the OGC. And so what I recommend is to fellow government agencies is to kind of be cozy with them and know who they are and let them know what you're doing up front and what you'd like to accomplish. And generally, most individuals are fairly forward-thinking, at least in my experience, and so that's been at the Department of Education. I can even speak to FSA in that respect. That they are looking for ways to secure all of that data, but then also grow and scale up and offer services at multiple points of contact.
Yeah, I would just add that just because you're moving to the cloud, you shouldn't compromise security. I mean, the same questions you'd ask for an internal deployment, you'll ask of a cloud services provider. And if you don't get the answers that are appropriate for the level of risk associated with the application, then you shouldn't proceed. So, next question, yeah.
Hi, this is Bernard Del Rosario with DISA. I have a question for the modeling and simulation example that was given. You said you had 1,000 runs, actually I have 3 really quick short questions. 1,000 runs per second up in 36 seconds over 8 nodes. Do you have a baseline to show what the performance was like over physical machines?
Yeah, so an individual model run, if you just do one, would take just a couple seconds for Russell 2. So what we were able to do is multiplex 1,000 runs in 36 seconds across 64 cores. On
64 cores?
Yeah, we used 64 physical cores, and we're running virtual machines on top of that. And so we accomplished 1,000 runs in 36 seconds. And if you did those runs individually, sequentially, it would take, they're 1 or 2 seconds each. So.
Oh, I meant over
Oh,
64 physical cores.
The overhead that we saw with the Zen hypervisor, it's approximately 40 to 50%. So I think the stats for 100 model runs, it's about 15 seconds on a physical machine, and it's around 23 seconds on a Zen virtual machine. Of course, there's different hypervisors. That's the one that we've
I'm seeing similar numbers.
Yeah,
The other
great.
question I had is, you talked about having software that is older and that has been in development for a long time, and now you had to take that and distribute it over multiple virtual machines and multiple cores. What software did you use to enable that, that kind of distributed computing?
Okay, so we have a load balancer known as HA proxy, and it sits on the front end, and it takes those service requests and it then routes them to virtual machines. And that's a pretty standard load balancer, HA proxy.
Great. I think we have time for one more question.
Thank you.
Do we have a question? Oh, okay, great.
Yeah, my name is Cheyenne, last name John from Kit Solutions. One question is about the procurement of vehicles. You mentioned, we know that according to FAR, really it was designed to purchase product. Now it's changed to service. How do you overcome those when you decide to purchase a service? And we've always run into that difficulty.
It's always a competition. So when there's an RFP, we put that out and we entertain everything that fits the statement of work, and look through those proposals and kind of divvy those out to respective colleagues to serve as objective judges on that panel. But it always comes down to who meets the best need of the statement of work and who can provide efficiencies according to that schedule. So we always abide by the FAR.
My question is not like in the service concept, like software service you purchase by per seat, per usage, per hour, whereas versus cost reimbursement per hour. That's really the real challenge. I know that's very hard to communicate with the purchaser agency to see this is my service. You're running that same problem.
Yeah, so the question, I'll repeat it because we didn't have the mic over here, is just about cloud-based applications might be priced per seat or per user versus a cost-plus basis, which some maybe traditional contracts were done under. And how do you get around? How do you work with that new dynamic in the procurement process? Anybody have?
We've ours is a cost per kind of time allotment, and we've just had to estimate what we expect our usage is based on previous performance, and then try and build in some measures that would allow us to either expand if we see that usage goes up, and or maybe even contract where usage goes down. So it's sort of a game of balance. You have to think about where you've been, where you'd like to go, and what you hope to accomplish, and then see if those pricing measures fit within that objective.
Yeah, anything else the other panels would like to add to that?
I'm the technical guy. I'm not going to touch that one with a 10-foot pole.
I will say that just in our own work in responding to government RFPs, 18 months ago, I would say it was rare that we saw functional requirement for a cloud option. In the last year, 50% of the RFPs we're seeing include specific wording around cloud options. So that's occurred just in the last 18 months. So if there's any question about, is this coming? Well, it's coming, and we're seeing it come very quickly. So I want to just conclude and thank the panelists for their insight here today. Please give them a round. And I will just say that, it's been great to hear their experiences.